I discovered my parents stole my $200,000 trust fund to support my sister. When I exposed them, they got furious and kicked me out of the house. To provide some context, my sister Corey has Down syndrome. She is 4 years older than me, and I've known for as long as I can remember that my sister was different from me in many ways. Even as a small child, I noted that Corey would respond strongly to every circumstance. If things didn't go her way, even in minor ways, she would scream and weep in a manner that most children did not. It was as if she couldn't take the frustration of things not living up to her expectations. Growing up, Corey had no pals. She had difficulty picking up on social cues and frequently came across as abrupt or even rude. While she wasn't trying to be impolite, her directness could be off-putting to other children who didn't comprehend her situation. As a result, many youngsters preferred to maintain their distance, leaving her feeling alienated. As a result, my parents made it a point to include me in her social life, frequently reminding me that I needed to bring her along when I went out with my friends. I realized they wanted her to feel included and have someone to interact with, so I didn't mind having my elder sister along. I felt it would be wonderful for her to have some company, and perhaps even make a few friends through my own social circles. However, spending time with Corey in the company of my friends was not easy. Her social skills were weak, and she struggled to integrate into groups. She often acted out in unexpected ways. She would occasionally push or even strike other children, especially if they had something she wanted. As a result, over time, my pals were less interested in hanging out with me if Corey was also around. They didn't want to deal with her unpredictable behavior, and I understood why. They were merely kids who wanted to play without interruptions or outbursts of hostility. Corey's impatience and inclination to lash out made things difficult for everyone, and I couldn't blame my friends for backing away from those circumstances. I understood that, as her sister, I had a responsibility to support and be there for Corey, especially given her struggles. But, to be honest, I needed space to mature, find my own friends, and live my life independently. However, my parents never let me be myself. Whenever I wanted to go something alone or spend time with my friends without Corey, they made me feel awful for even considering leaving her behind. They'd say things like, "Sisters should stick together," or "You need to think about Corey, she's your sister." It was as if they expected me to always choose her over my friends or anybody else, no matter what I wanted or needed for myself. What made things worse was that they never seemed to put these same efforts into assisting Corey comprehend how to change her conduct or develop her social skills. They never sat her down to explain why sharing or being compassionate with others could help her connect with others more effectively. Instead, they seemed to accept that I would fill in all of the gaps in her social life. So, throughout the years, I became Corey's lone buddy by default. Don't get me wrong, I adore Corey. She is family, and I recognize that none of this is her fault. I understand she confronts her own set of obstacles every day, and I can't imagine what it's like to be in her shoes. But, at the same time, do you know how it feels to be the invisible child in a family? My parents' entire world revolved around Corey, with every choice, idea, and money intended to make her life easier and more comfortable. Corey requires ongoing attention and specialized care. My parents have spent a lot of money on her numerous therapies over the years, including physiotherapy to help with her physical coordination, speech therapy to improve her communication, and occupational therapy to help her develop motor skills and independence. She also gets regular checkups, medical tests, and evaluations to track her progress and keep her health in control. The care she requires is considerable and time-consuming. While I fully grasp its significance, it frequently felt as if there was little place for me. One of Corey's specific issues is her lack of impulse control, which makes understanding boundaries difficult. For example, she is obsessed with the color pink and enjoys anything pink. She is instantly drawn to anything in that color. She feels impelled to seize it, hold it, and not let go. It doesn't matter whether it's a pink pocketbook, a teddy bear, a piece of clothes, or someone else's prized possessions. Once it's in her hands, she clings to it, and if anyone attempts to take it away, she bursts into tears, sometimes having a full-fledged breakdown. This tendency has resulted in numerous unpleasant situations, particularly while we are out in public. My parents frequently have to bargain with individuals or buy these pink trinkets from complete strangers simply to get Corey to calm down. I've seen them pay for a variety of strange pink items, some of which are worthless to us but mean everything to Corey at the time. I understand why they do it, and I understand that it's more than a wish for her. It's practically a need over which she has no control. However, watching my parents devote so much time, money, and mental energy to soothing her urges and satisfying her demands has left me feeling forgotten. Furthermore, my parents' approach to parenting Corey has had serious ramifications over the years. Their method of keeping her satisfied has devolved into what I can only describe as a shopping addiction. For Corey, it began simply enough. Every weekend, my parents would purchase her something pink. A toy, a piece of jewelry, or another trinket, to keep her happy and as a bargaining chip for her cooperation throughout the week. My parents would tell Corey that she had to be a good girl, if she wanted them to give her whatever she wanted, and she would instantly agree. What began as a temporary arrangement quickly evolved into a cherished family ritual. These purchases are not inexpensive either. Many of the goods Corey desires are one of a kind or custom made, which frequently requires a significant investment. For a long time, I didn't think about the cost of all this pink stuff. I thought my parents could afford it. I never questioned how they could afford to continue this habit week after week, year after year. But soon, I discovered something I could not have anticipated. My parents had not been managing their expenses through regular budgeting or savings. They have been committing fraud to cover the rising prices. You see, when I was born, my grandparents established a trust fund for both me and Corey, with equal sums given to us. Corey, who has Down syndrome, was supposed to use the money for her therapies or whatever else she needed, but I was supposed to use mine for college or a down payment on a home. Only my parents had access to these funds, but my grandparents trusted them to handle them carefully. They also made certain that Corey and I were aware of these trust funds from a young age, allowing us to rely on them for financial support. It was a thoughtful present from my grandparents, and I always felt secure knowing that the trust fund would be available when the time came. When Corey reached 18, she received a portion of the trust monies. Since she still lives with and relies on my parents, they have been in charge of managing her money. They've utilized her trust fund over the years to assist pay for her treatments and therapies, which have become more demanding as she's gotten older. The money has helped with everything, from her medical treatment to providing the materials she requires for daily life. I recognized that the money was intended to meet her needs, and I never questioned how it was being spent. When I turned 18, I anticipated to get my half of the trust fund, as promised. I had previously planned to utilize the money for my college tuition. Once that was taken care of, I intended to preserve the remainder for any additional bills that would arise as I approached maturity. I had my future planned out, and I was counting on that fund to help me forge a steady route forward. But little did I know, my hopes would soon be dashed. My grandparents arranged a fantastic 18th birthday party for me last week. They had done the same for Corey when she turned 18, so I had been looking forward to my own celebration for quite some time. They had invited everyone in their family. I was genuinely pleased, surrounded by the people I cared about, and it was one of those days when everything felt just right. Following the cake cutting, my grandparents made an announcement to the entire gathering. They told me how proud they were to see me all grown up and gone to college, and that as a birthday present this year, I would receive the trust fund they had put up for me years before. The entire room erupted in cheers and clapping, with everyone praising me on this incredible gift. I felt a rush of exhilaration and thankfulness come over me as I hugged and thanked my grandparents for everything. But in the midst of all the enthusiasm, I saw that my parents were the only ones who did not appear joyful. While everyone else smiled and congratulated me, my parents seemed unconcerned. They stood off to the side, their faces strained, almost uncomfortable. I could see them exchanging glances, and while they didn't say anything, there was a discomfort to them that was difficult to miss. It struck me as peculiar, but in the excitement of the celebration, I didn't give it much thought. I wanted to enjoy the rest of the party, so I put it to the back of my mind. Later that evening, when we got home from the party, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. My parents appeared uptight and didn't speak much with me. Typically, they were concerned about Corey's health, mood, or anything she needed. But that night, Corey appeared absolutely satisfied, playing with one of her new gifts. Sensing something else was going on, I finally asked my folks if there was anything wrong. That's when my father gave me a serious look and informed me that he and my mother needed to talk to me alone. The tone of his voice immediately sent shivers down my spine. I could see it was serious. We sat together in the living room, and they exchanged troubled looks before my father began to talk. He explained, almost tentatively, that they wouldn't be able to give me my trust fund as my grandparents had planned. I didn't understand what he meant at first, so I asked him to clarify. My father continued, his voice full of shame and despair. He revealed that throughout the years, they had spent all of Corey's trust fund on her. When there was nothing left, they began to utilize the money from my trust fund, which they had access to. With a big sigh, he revealed that 90% of my trust fund was already gone, leaving little for me. I was taken aback as I considered what he had just stated. The money set aside for my future, for my education, was gone. He went on to say that the majority of money had been spent on my sister's shopping habit and the various treatments she required. As his words sank in, a numbness crept over me. My thoughts raced, attempting to figure out how this happened without my knowledge. They had raided my trust fund without informing me, to cover Corey's bills and habits. I questioned why they would do something like this to me. My parents began to justify themselves, their words laced with defensiveness. They informed me that caring for Corey had cost them a lot of money, but they had no choice but to do it. Her needs have always come first. My father discussed the never-ending expenses, the therapies, treatments, and, of course, the innumerable gifts she required every week to stay calm. I contended that they could have ceased buying her all of those items when they learned they were financially taxing. They did, however, highlight that for Corey, these goods were more than just luxuries. They were things that helped her manage and made her world a bit simpler to understand. And for them, every penny spent had been worthwhile. They couldn't simply refuse her. At that point, I felt a rush of rage fill up inside me. I questioned how they could justify spending nearly everything I had saved for my future without even speaking with me. Didn't I matter to them? My father tried to calm me down, stating that I needed to comprehend what they had been through. He discussed the stress they'd felt, the sacrifices they'd had to make as Corey's caregivers, and how difficult it was to satisfy her requirements week after week. My mother nodded, noting that Corey's condition necessitated continual care. And sometimes that meant spending money in ways that were unfair to me but were important for Corey. Both of them felt that because I didn't have any of Corey's ailments, I had an advantage over her, therefore I shouldn't be so greedy with the money. I felt a tear of frustration run down my cheek as I assured them that I wasn't doubting Corey's needs or their decision to prioritize her care. I loved her too. But this was about the lack of honesty, how they had gone behind my back and exploited what was meant to be my future without believing I deserved to know. I informed them that this trust money had been my only source of security, the one thing I felt I could rely on to start my life on my own, and it was now almost completely gone. Instead of addressing how upset and betrayed I felt, they began gaslighting me, turning the subject around on me. They expressed disappointment that I couldn't be more understanding, and that as Corey's sister, I should appreciate that sometimes sacrifices were necessary. They said, "We are all in this together." I was astounded that they wanted me to simply accept it all as a fool. To realize that Corey's needs had to come first, no questions asked. I questioned them why it was always Corey and not me. Did they not want me to do anything in my life? That's when my parents revealed a plan they had for my future, which revolved solely around taking on the task of caring for Corey. They explained that they never cared about my education because it isn't that important. They expected me to step up and help them with Corey's financial and emotional needs. My mother looked at me with a mix of pleading and resignation, saying, "You know, we're getting older, and it's exhausting looking after Corey. We won't be able to do this forever, so we need you to step in." She went on to say that they didn't mind if I went to a local college rather than the college of my choice. She only hoped I'd get a steady job as soon as I graduated so I could bring Corey to live with me. Then she said we could finally rest. Dad advised that I start contributing financially sooner, while still in college, by working a part-time job and sending money home to Corey. It would help Corey have some independence in her life, he told me, by letting her buy whatever it is that she wants and allowing her to maintain the lifestyle we've provided for her. I sat there, stunned, trying to figure out what my folks expected me to do. At that point, I felt completely misled and frustrated. This was not the future I envisioned for myself. It seemed as if my parents expected me to abandon my own aspirations and plans in order to easily transition into their role as Corey's caregiver, without ever asking what I desired for my own life. Finally, I roared at them, my voice quivering with years of accumulated rage and hurt. Have you ever thought about what I want? Or am I just here to live for Corey? You never even thought to ask me what I wanted, did you? All these years, I've been expected to just give, and now you're pushing me to be Corey's caretaker so you can rest. How is any of this fair? My voice trembled as the rage spilled out. You're making decisions for me without even considering what it means for my life. I can't just drop everything for Corey and pretend like my dreams don't matter. All of my bottled up anger spilled out, years of feeling forgotten, years of being told I needed to prioritize Corey, and years of watching them pander to her every whim while I was expected to quietly support from the sidelines. My folks constantly attempt to persuade me that I shouldn't be so selfish and inconsiderate. It was as if they wanted me to conform and embrace a life I had never planned for simply because they believed it was better for Corey. So, since last week, I've been completely ignoring my parents. All I feel for them is contempt. Am I the a-hole for reporting my parents for taking my trust fund and spending it on my sister? Update 1. Wow, This post has gone viral in just a few hours. Thank you for all your advice. I am currently on my way to tell my grandparents everything. Since the trust fund was created with their money, I believe it is critical that I have their support while I confront this matter. After I've explained everything to them, I plan to let my grandparents decide what we should do next. I trust their judgment and know they will have my best interests at heart as we find out how to tackle this together. I had kept my voice shut all this time because I truly believed my folks would finally come around. However, it is evident that they have not. Update 2. It has been 2 weeks since my last update, so I told my grandparents everything. They were as astonished as I was to learn that my parents had utilized my trust fund without my authorization. That same week, my grandparents came to question my parents about what had happened to my trust fund. My grandparents had worked hard to establish the fund for both me and Corey. They were deeply committed to ensuring that we have the financial resources we require for our futures. They were understandably upset when they discovered that my parents had illegally drained the money behind their backs. My parents answered by telling them the same sob story they had shared with me. They recounted, once again, how they had been obliged to spend the money on Corey's care and therapy. They urged my grandparents to explain why they did what they did, as if their rationale would somehow make it all right. But my grandfather would have none of it. He roared at them, his voice filled with fury and amazement. He told them unequivocally that they were accountable for repaying the whole trust fund, regardless of the circumstances or justifications for its use. He was visibly angry and felt betrayed by my parents' conduct. For a moment, I hoped they'd finally accept responsibility and set things right. Then, frightened, my mother came to my grandparents and began pleading with them. She indicated that caring for Corey was difficult, and that her needs were numerous and frequent. She stated that Corey's trust money was insufficient to support the increasing costs of her treatments and ongoing bills. She rationalized taking my trust fund by claiming it helped them care for Corey. And then, in an almost horrible twist of fate, my parents turned against me. They reprimanded me for telling my grandparents everything. They were upset that I had revealed their activities and forced them to face the repercussions. My dad, in particular, was furious. He told me, with a strong edge in his voice, that I should consider myself fortunate since I was born normal, unlike Corey, and that I shouldn't despise her sister so much. It was as if my entire life, my challenges and needs, didn't matter. Everything revolved around Corey. And now I was being punished for not fitting in with the role they had chosen for me. Without thinking, I looked them in the eye and told them straight out that if they didn't give me back the money I owed, I would sue them and make sure they went to jail for their actions. I reminded them that what they did was illegal, and there was no way they could justify it in court. They couldn't prove otherwise that the trust fund was intended for me and only me. My tone was calm, but my comments were plain and firm. I could see the color drain from my parents' faces as they comprehend what I had just spoken. For the first time, I genuinely stood up for myself, and I could see the shock in their faces. They were not used to me being that straightforward. So resolute. Fortunately, my grandparents nodded in accord. They supported me because they knew I was correct. Seeing their encouragement, I persisted, speaking with greater conviction. I told my parents that it didn't matter how much they spent on Corey or what they did for her. Corey was their child, and it wasn't my obligation to give up my future for her. I loved Corey, of course, and I would always be there for her, but I wasn't going to sacrifice my own life, education, and goals just to make her feel cared for. I made it plain that I was tired of always coming second to her, of being overlooked while her needs were always prioritized. I finished by declaring I was done with them. I had had enough of being treated like the invisible child, who was expected to meekly accept whatever scraps were left for her. For the first time in my life, I stood up for myself, and I knew I could never take it back. My parents had pushed me to my limit, and I was not going to allow them to continue to dictate my life. My father instantly disagreed, his voice full of shock and anger, insisting that I couldn't threaten them with jail. He told me that as their child, I should have family loyalty and be willing to support them at all times, especially after everything they had done for me over the years. His statements were intended to make me feel guilty and to remind me of my responsibilities to them. My mother, attempting to ease the situation, even weighed in, proposing that since there was still 10% of my trust fund remaining, I could simply accept it and keep my mouth shut. It felt like they were treating me like a charity case, as if the residual crumbs from my trust fund were all I deserved and I should forget about anything else. But my granddad refused to back down. He came in, his voice stern, and informed my parents that if they didn't agree to give me back the full amount, he would get the best lawyer in town to sue them. The possibility of legal action appeared to have had a significant impact on my parents. They eventually became silent, recognizing my grandfather meant business. After a tense exchange, they reluctantly admitted that what they had done was incorrect. Nonetheless, they begged my grandparents for some time to consider things over. However, the ramifications didn't stop there. My father was furious with me for exposing them to my grandparents and threatening him and mom with jail time. In his rage, he declared that he never wanted to see my face again. He urged me to leave his house, stating he had had enough of supporting a selfish person like me, someone who could backstab their own family, like this. When my grandparents heard this, they quickly offered to have me move in with them. They assured me that I always had a home with them and that they would help me in every way they could as I worked out my next steps. So, without hesitation, I packed my clothing, gathered my necessary documents, and moved out of my parents' house. Currently, I live with my grandparents. I hate that my parents have just kicked me out, but I'm also relieved to be away from them. I miss Corey a lot. I'm aware that what I did has permanently damaged my relationship with my family. However, I do not regret standing up for myself. Update 3. It's been a month since I last updated. After much pressure and legal threats from my grandfather, my parents finally signed an agreement drawn out by my grandfather's lawyer. The terms were easy. Because they could not repay the entire cash they had taken from me in one lump sum, they would make installments over the next 18 months. This would give them time to pay off the loan gradually, without putting a hardship on their finances all at once. However, the agreement had a vital stipulation: if they failed to make any payment by the agreed-upon date, or if they did not follow through at all, my grandparents and I had the right to initiate urgent legal action. This clause served as a safeguard, ensuring that they couldn't avoid paying me back. My folks are still unhappy with me. They blame me for everything that has happened, and it seems like they are unable to let go of their wrath or humiliation. They still don't understand why I took the actions I did and stood up for myself in such a dramatic fashion. Despite their hatred, my grandma has assured me that none of this is my fault. She told me again today that I did what I needed to do to protect myself and my future, and that I should focus on moving forward now rather than looking back. I see Corey from time to time. She misses me, and I miss her also. She frequently inquires about me, and it is evident that she is unaware of the complete picture. But she understands enough to see that something significant occurred between us. She's noticed that I'm not as present as I once was and that my parents did something to injure me. It's horrible not to be able to help her understand how bad our parents are. Regardless, I'll always be there for her.
I quit my job to care for my father, but was shocked to discover his interactions with a prostitute broker and substantial withdrawals from his brokerage account. My name is Daniel. At 29, living in a bustling metropolitan area just an hour's drive from where I was raised, I find myself in a juxtaposition of worlds. My high-paced urban life as a successful software developer contrasts sharply with the quiet suburban life of my family. Earning $200,000 a year, I've established a comfortable existence in the city, complete with a sleek apartment overlooking the skyline, a wardrobe suited for tech company chic, and a social circle that revolves around tech meetups, weekend hiking trips, and the occasional high-end restaurant outing. Yet despite this seemingly ideal setup, my thoughts frequently drift back to the single-story house nestled in the serene suburbs, the place I still call home. The house, with its fading red brick facade and the large oak tree my father planted the year I was born, cradles more than just memories. It embodies the ongoing story of my family. My mother Jane, at 64, still powers through her work week, dedicating over 60 hours to her managerial role at a local logistics company. Despite the toll it takes, she brings home $95,000 annually, a sum that barely stretches to cover the essentials and the medical bills that have begun to pile up. Her resilience, often silent and unacknowledged, has been the cornerstone of our family's survival. Living with her are my father, Michael, and my older sister Sarah, along with her spirited 4.5-year-old son, Ethan. Dad, age 73, retired a few years back. His days of working as an electrician are behind him, replaced now by afternoons on the porch with a crossword puzzle, the remnants of a life spent in labor quietly fading into the routine of a man sustained by Social Security checks. His recent health scares, multiple heart surgeries aimed at preventing strokes, have marked him with a fragility that is both new and deeply disconcerting. Sarah, having never quite recovered from a tumultuous divorce, teaches at a local preschool. Earning just $60 an hour, she relies heavily on our parents for support. The echoes of her laughter, once the soundtrack of our childhood, now seem muffled by the weight of single motherhood and financial strain. Ethan's youthful energy brings a much-needed brightness to the house, his innocence a stark contrast to the complexities of the adult lives around him. Growing up, the warmth of family was the foundation of my world. My parents, though never well off, ensured that my sister and I lacked for nothing essential. They poured their energies into nurturing our interests, Mine in computers and hers in art, fueling our dreams with the kind of unwavering support only parents can provide. This backdrop of familial love and sacrifice has shaped my understanding of responsibility and gratitude. Even as a teenager, I understood that the financial planning my parents had managed wouldn't suffice for their retirement. The inevitability of my role as their future financial backbone became apparent early on. It was a silent promise I made to myself, standing in our modest backyard, looking up at the stars, a promise to give back to the two people who had given me everything. My life now, filled with coding sprints and software launches, is worlds away from the simplicity of suburban rhythms. Yet the success I've found in the city isn't just mine, it belongs to my family too. Each achievement, each milestone reached, is a testament to the sacrifices made in that small house. This connection pulls me back, time and again, to where it all began. The phone calls began to increase about 6 months ago. Mom's voice, usually steady and calm, carried a tremor of worry as she updated me on Dad's health. The surgeries, the complications, and the haunting diagnosis of microvascular dementia and cerebrovascular disease that followed. Each call etched a deeper line of concern into my daily life, a stark reminder of the ephemeral nature of time and health. It was during one such call, as I gazed out over the city lights from my apartment, that the decision was made. The pull of my family's needs outweighed the allure of city lights and fleeting tech trends. I knew then with a certainty that rooted itself deep within me. I needed to return home, to be there in ways that phone calls and weekend visits simply couldn't cover. So, I started to plan. Plan for a future that involved more than just my personal aspirations, plans that would weave the safety and well-being of my family into the fabric of my daily existence. This wasn't just a decision born out of duty but out of a deep-seated love and a commitment to those who had shaped me. This return home isn't merely a change of address, it's a reorientation of my life's priorities. As I pack up my city life, each item I place into a box, a book, a photo, a souvenir from a tech conference, is a tangible reminder of the journey I've undertaken. Ahead lies a path filled with challenges and adjustments, but also with the opportunity to give back in the most meaningful way possible. As I maneuvered my sedan into the familiar driveway of my childhood home, the crunch of gravel under tires felt like a metaphor for the uneasy reintroduction to a life I once knew. Stepping out, I was greeted by the sight of my mother, Jane, at the front door. Her smile was warm but worn, the kind that spoke of countless worries weathered over years. She wrapped me in an embrace that felt both comforting and desperate, her way of saying she needed help without uttering a word. Inside, the atmosphere of the house was thick with the scent of nostalgia mixed with tension. My sister Sarah stood in the kitchen, a half-smile playing on her lips as she juggled making dinner and entertaining Ethan, who buzzed around with the boundless energy of childhood. Our greetings were brief, a stilted exchange that belied the deeper currents of concern we all felt but didn't voice. Sarah was visibly thinner than I remembered, her face drawn not just from the fatigue of single motherhood, but from the constant strain of living in a house clouded with uncertainty. The first few days were an adjustment, a recalibration of roles within our family dynamics. My mother continued to work, her hours unyielding despite the added emotional load. At night, we sat at the dinner table, conversations skirting around the unspoken, Dad's condition, the financial strain, the future. It was during these meals that I truly understood the full extent of what had been kept from me in our phone calls. The weight of Dad's medical expenses, the fear of what was to come, and the everyday challenges of caring for someone who was slowly forgetting the life he had led. Dad's interactions with us had changed profoundly. Once a lively storyteller, his conversations now lost their thread, his frustrations palpable as he grappled with the gaps in his memory. Observing him, I saw flashes of the man who taught me to ride a bike, who fixed broken appliances with a magician's ease, now struggling to remember names, faces, and dates. The impact on Mom was heartbreaking. She oscillated between being a caring spouse and a weary nurse, her face etching deeper with lines of sorrow each day. Sarah's reaction to my return was mixed. Initially, there was relief, an extra pair of hands to help, a reprieve from her role as the primary support. But as days passed, old grievances surfaced. We clashed, not just over small mundane things like household chores or schedules, but about deeper issues. Resentments about past decisions, particularly my choice to move away and pursue my career, came to light. "You left just when things were getting tough," she accused one evening, her words slicing through the fragile peace. "And now you just waltz back in expecting to fix everything?" These confrontations were painful but necessary. They opened up dialogues long overdue, about our roles in this family, about support and sacrifice. It was through these difficult conversations that we began to navigate our new reality. Slowly, we started to forge a path forward, not just as individuals living under one roof, but as a cohesive unit facing a crisis together. Through it all, my bond with Ethan became a source of joy and escape. His innocence and unbridled enthusiasm for life reminded us all of the simpler joys. In his world, the problems were as solvable as figuring out the right block to fit into a puzzle. He became my little shadow, following me around, asking questions, his laughter a balm on the rough days. As weeks turned into months, my role in the family began to solidify. I found myself balancing my work remotely with attending doctor's appointments with Dad, discussing financial strategies with Mom, and providing moral support to Sarah. The shift was palpable. Where once I was just a visitor in their lives, I now became an integral part of the household's daily rhythm. One evening, as Mom and I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, she turned to me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm so glad you're here," she whispered. "It's been hard. Harder than I ever let on. But having you here makes it feel like we can manage this, like we're not alone in it." Her words struck a chord. I realized then that my return was not just about providing financial or physical support. It was about healing, about mending the frayed threads of our family fabric. It was about showing up, not just in times of crisis but every day, proving through actions that family, with all its imperfections and challenges, is worth every sacrifice. The transition back home wasn't smooth. It was fraught with adjustments, misunderstandings, and at times heartache. But it was also filled with moments of profound connection, understanding, and gradual healing. In this house, with these people, I rediscovered the essence of home. It wasn't just a place, but a feeling of belonging, of being needed, and most importantly, of loving and being loved, unconditionally. The stability we once took for granted began to shake when my father's health declined. The man who taught me how to throw a baseball, who could fix just about anything broken, found himself battling a series of health issues that seemed to come one after the other. It started with heart problems that required immediate and intensive medical intervention. The terms TAVR, transcatheter aortic valve replacement, and TCAR, transcarotid artery revascularization, became unexpectedly familiar as we navigated through the complexities of cardiac surgeries designed to prevent strokes. Despite the doctor's efforts, a stroke slipped through the cracks of medical prevention, leaving him with small vessel disease and vascular dementia. His cognitive functions began to deteriorate, a stark contrast to the sharp wit and immense knowledge he once wielded effortlessly. Making the decision to move back home wasn't easy. It required me to uproot the life I had built in the city, the late-night coding sessions, the weekend hikes, the network of ambitious tech-savvy friends. I had to step away from a promotion that was almost in reach, trading potential career advancements for family responsibilities. It was a trade I made willingly, driven by an innate sense of duty that my parents had instilled in me from a young age. Moving back to the suburban home where I grew up meant reacquainting myself with its rhythms and routines. My old room, once a shrine to teenage ambitions and dreams, now seemed smaller, the walls echoing the past. Adjusting to this life meant quieter evenings, the absence of city noise replaced by the subtle sounds of a house that breathed with the lives of its inhabitants. It meant seeing my father's empty chair at the dinner table when he had particularly bad days, and it meant stepping into the role of caretaker, a role I had never envisioned in my youthful imaginings. To aid in my father's care, I introduced technology that I hoped would bridge the gap between his needs and my ability to meet them. The AirPods Pro I bought him connected him to his favorite music and shows, providing comfort when the confusion of dementia clouded his mind. More significantly, I gifted him my Apple Watch Series 8, equipped with health monitoring features. This watch became a crucial tool in tracking his heart's behavior, particularly its ability to detect atrial fibrillation, a condition we now watched meticulously. The transition was emotionally taxing. The joy of being close to my family again was often overshadowed by the realities of my father's condition. Each doctor's visit, each small sign of his worsening health, reminded me of why I had returned. I spent countless hours researching ways to enhance his quality of life, from diet changes to cognitive exercises that might slow the progression of his dementia. That night was unusually quiet, the sort of silence that seems almost anticipatory, as if the house itself was holding its breath. After dinner, where conversation fluttered nervously around mundane topics, I found myself restless. With a mind that refused to quiet, I decided to tinker with some of the tech gadgets I'd brought for Dad, thinking perhaps I could distract myself. Dad had always been somewhat wary of technology, but he had taken a peculiar interest in the Apple Watch I gave him, fascinated by its ability to monitor his heart rate and other health metrics. It had become a routine for me to help him set it up, ensure it was charged, and sometimes, reset it to make sure it was functioning optimally. That night, as I took the watch into my hands, I noticed it needed resetting. The screen was lit up with notifications, too many for Dad to have possibly managed on his own. As I navigated through the menus to find the settings, A message notification popped up briefly before disappearing. My curiosity piqued. I ventured into the Messages app. It was then I noticed the recently deleted folder had entries, something I hadn't expected Dad to know how to use. The logical part of my mind suggested there was a simple explanation. Perhaps Mom had deleted messages after borrowing his watch. But something about the late hour, the quiet of the house, and the nagging sense of unease that had settled in my stomach compelled me to open the folder. The messages I found there were not just surprising. They were shocking. The texts were not from family members or old friends, but from an unknown number, discussing arrangements and meetings with an unsettling familiarity and explicitness. Each message was more revealing than the last, discussing times, locations, and payments. The content was clear. My father had been communicating with a prostitute broker. I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me, followed by a sharp pang of betrayal. My father, the man who had taught me the values of honesty and integrity, was leading a secret life that was now laid bare before me. I sat there, the watch heavy in my hands, as I struggled to reconcile this image with the father I thought I knew. Driven by a need to understand the full extent of this betrayal, I logged into his brokerage account, which he had shared access with me years ago for emergencies. What I found only deepened the chasm that was opening up inside me. The account, which should have held close to $100,000, was now down to $66,000. The transaction history showed several withdrawals of $3,000 each over the past year, coinciding with the dates mentioned in the deleted texts. The room felt like it was spinning as I pieced together the implications of these withdrawals. This wasn't just a moral transgression, it was a financial betrayal that affected our entire family. The money in that account was supposed to be part of my parents' retirement fund, crucial for their care, especially given Dad's health condition. Yet it had been siphoned away to fund clandestine meetings that shattered the facade of the life we had been living. I sat alone with this information well into the night, the glow from the screen of my laptop casting shadows on the walls. The weight of what I had discovered felt overwhelming, not just in its immediate impact, but in what it meant for the future. How could I confront my father about this? What would this revelation do to my mother, who had already borne so much? And what of Sarah and Ethan, who lived under this roof, innocent and unaware of the storm that was brewing? The night's revelations hung heavily in the air, tainting the familiar comfort of my old bedroom. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. From anger and betrayal to an overwhelming sense of desolation. Growing up, my father was my hero. He was the one who taught me to ride a bike, to respect others, and to stand up for what I believe in. But as I grew older, I witnessed the facade crumble. Behind closed doors, his relationship with my mother was fraught with tension and discord. He spent money with little regard for our family's financial stability, indulging in whims as if the act could fill the growing voids within our household. My mother, in stark contrast, was the pillar who bore the financial burdens, working tirelessly, yet never allowed herself the luxury of even the smallest indulgences. In my early 20s, the strain had become unbearable. I had issued an ultimatum to them: resolve their issues or face losing me. At the time, it seemed like a necessary threat. Looking back, it only served to deepen the divide, especially with my mother, who felt caught in an impossible situation. She resented the position I put her in, yet continued to patch the seams of our family fabric in silence. The night before, as I delved deeper into my father's deceit, the years of pent-up frustration and disappointment erupted. The discovery of his communications with a prostitute broker, along with the significant withdrawals from his brokerage account, was the last straw. This wasn't just a moral failing, it was a betrayal that jeopardized our family's financial security. Sitting at the kitchen table that morning, surrounded by the remnants of my childhood and the shattered pieces of the respect I once had for my father, I felt a profound sense of alienation. I couldn't face my family. I couldn't look into my mother's eyes, knowing the additional pain this would cause her. So, I made a decision. One that now, in the quiet solitude of my city apartment, I question with every aching part of my being. I left. Without a word of explanation, I packed a bag, the weight of each item seeming to anchor me further into a quagmire of guilt and confusion. I left a note, vague and insufficient, expressing a need for some time alone to think. As I drove back to the metropolitan bustle from which I had come, each mile widened the chasm between my family and me, both physically and emotionally. Now, sitting in the dim light of my apartment, the city sounds a dull roar in the background. I am plagued by uncertainty and remorse. The silence of the space amplifies the chaos of my thoughts. I ponder the irony of how I, who had returned home to mend and care, had fled when the reality of my family's imperfections became too stark to bear. I'm struggling with the dichotomy of my emotions. On one hand, my father's actions are indefensible, a reckless endangerment of our family's stability and my mother's sacrifices. On the other, he is still my father, The man who, despite his flaws, played a crucial role in who I am today. How do I reconcile these two sides? How do I balance the scales of justice and filial duty? I remember my mother's words from years ago, after I had issued my ultimatum. She had said, "We all have our demons and disappointments, but we don't have to carry them alone." Her words echo in my mind now, a reminder that perhaps abandonment isn't the solution, but a continuation of a cycle of hurt. I find myself typing out my thoughts, casting them into the void of the internet. Perhaps someone out there has faced similar crossroads, has navigated the murky waters of familial obligation and personal integrity. I seek not absolution, but perspective. How do others deal with the complexities of family dynamics, where love and disappointment are so often intertwined? As I sit here, the cursor blinking expectantly, I realize that my journey back home isn't just about geographical distance. It's about bridging the gap between the son I was and the man I need to become. It's about facing the hard truths, not just about my father, but about myself and my own reactions. It's about understanding that in the tapestry of family, each thread, however flawed, contributes to the strength and pattern of the whole. Tomorrow, I will call my mother. I will not offer excuses for my abrupt departure, but I will listen. I will try to understand her side of this lifelong partnership that has borne so much strain. And perhaps through these conversations, we can begin to forge a new path forward, not just for her and me, but for our entire family. For now, I sit alone with my thoughts, the city outside unaware of the turmoil within. But I am resolved not to let this night pass without reaching out, without trying to mend what has been broken. For in the end, family is not just about the good times shared, but also about navigating the storms together, and emerging, perhaps a little battered, but whole. I find myself in a situation where I desperately need some guidance, and I hope you can offer me your opinions and possible solutions. After uncovering some troubling secrets about my father's actions, which have jeopardized our family's financial stability and emotional well-being, I'm torn about how to best handle the situation. I left home abruptly, driven by a mix of anger, disappointment, and confusion. And now, sitting alone in my apartment, I'm struggling to find the right course of action. This discovery has not only caused a rift in my family but has also left me questioning my own decisions, especially my immediate reaction to flee. The dynamics in my family have always been complicated, shaped by long-standing financial strains and personal grievances, and this latest revelation feels like a breaking point. I am reaching out to you, the community, in hopes of gaining some perspective on how others might navigate such a family crisis. How do you balance personal integrity with familial responsibilities, especially when faced with deep-seated issues like betrayal? How can I approach this situation in a way that might help mend the relationships rather than cause further damage? Your insights and advice would be invaluable to me during this difficult time, and I truly appreciate any thoughts you share. Thank you for taking the time to listen about my situation, and for any guidance you can provide.